And I think it's very indicative of that story of money leaving quality names to go chase the AI bubble, essentially, because they're going into something more exciting that's moving faster now. That won't be moving faster for long term.
Welcome to Stock Club, the podcast where we find and discuss stocks that anyone can buy, many of which we believe will go on to grow your wealth. This week, Mike and I are going to answer the following 3 questions. The first is, if you could only buy one industry, the entire industry, to hold for the next 10 years for the most reliable returns, which one would you choose and why? The second question is, if you could only buy one industry to hold for the next 10 years for the biggest moonshot, which would you choose and why? And the third question of sorts is, name your top 3 favorite businesses in each of those 2 industries. So it's going to be a bit of a blur, I've no doubt about it. Before we jump in, though, I want to remind our listeners that seats at Investicon are selling, and they're selling fast. It's on 27th of August. That's just about a month from now. And our big media push is on the way with interviews with many of the guests under, what's it called, embargo or locked in from a lot of major channels. The theme for the event is called The Top 3 Investing Ideas for 2027 and Beyond from Investing Masters. So everybody on that stage is going to tell you their 3 favorite stocks mostly that you can buy immediately for what we hope will be the creation of generational wealth. And we are delighted to welcome co-founder of the Motley Fool, David Gardner, as our VIP speaker. David has a crystal ball. He has called so many winners over the years, and on stage, he's going to give us a glimpse into his rule-breaking style of investing, which has created untold wealth for countless people around the world since the late 90s. So that's it. Oh, if you want a ticket for Investicon, I recommend emailing Brian at MyWallSt. That's MyWallSt.com. Brian at MyWallSt.com. He's the CEO of the event, and it is only he who can give out the last remaining discount codes. You don't want to miss this, because we also have other speakers that we haven't announced for various reasons, but I think you'll have a great day. It's an all-day event. It's a Thursday in sunny Dublin, and it's conjoined with the Aer Lingus College Classic American football game, which is happening 2 days later. That's it. And if you have any queries, hit Brian up at MyWallSt.com. Mike, how are you, and how is the weather in Biarritz?
Weather's good. Can't complain. It's about 27, 28 degrees outside.
Just
big
perfect.
day here in France. It's Bastille Day, 14th of July.
Oh, Bastille Day today.
Yeah.
14th of July, of course. It's funny how these things, you just miss them when they're not your thing.
Yeah, and then obviously World Cup semi-final season. So people will be listening to this knowing the result. So I could be set up very much for catastrophe by talking about this. But
so you're going to be shouting "Allez le bleu."
100%, yeah, complete bandwagoning. But I was thinking about it then. It's hilarious because like the Bastille Day, they always do the big fireworks celebrations and stuff.
Oh,
so
yeah.
wouldn't it be so horribly, like, just desperately sad? France get knocked out in like a penalty shootout or some like last minute goal or whatever, and then just the fireworks start 5 minutes after the game.
It's just one of those little whizzers that's like you buy for €10 when you're a kid.
Yeah.
And they decide to keep them for a big one next year. So it's the battle of the giants tonight, really. Whoever wins, obviously whoever wins tonight is on the front foot for taking home the trophy. But yeah, when you think Spain versus France, from the outset, you got to put those two as the favorite. Argentina and the UK, watching Argentina state of play to date hasn't been as inspiring as it was in previous years, but tonight will be a great match. Look forward 100%.
To that. Nervous now, but be good either way. It's funny because like I get to enjoy it, but I'm not as invested like in any way, shape, or form as it would be if Ireland were playing or any other of my teams are playing. But it's still in the moment. You're very much there and you're cheering them on and stuff. So it is. It's fun.
You'll pretend you're upset if they don't win, and you do a good job with it.
It's fun. It's fun being in the bandwagon and not really caring too much, but still getting to enjoy all the highs of it. So yeah. So that's it.
Okay, well, let's see how that goes. Now, Mike, we have a lot to talk about, and I think we had a very quick pre-podcast meeting yesterday, and I hit you with this idea, which has a lot in it. Your favorite industry for conservative growth, your favorite industry for what might be outsized growth, and then some of your favorite stocks from those two categories. So let's start with reliable returns. So just for the clarity of our listener, imagine you had an index fund that was entirely representative of just one industry. So you were actually buying the entire thing. Every company in that industry is now your portfolio. It's obviously a thought experiment. But what we want to do is start with which industry is most certain to deliver returns over a 10-year period. So we've chosen a very comfortable investment window for us, but nonetheless, nothing is certain. So Mike and I get a little uncomfortable by saying it's absolutely reliable. So with that caveat there, do you want to kick off, Mike, and tell me which industry have you chosen? And then you may as well throw on the three businesses that tickle your fancy in that industry.
Yeah. So I was thinking about this, and it's a lot of research went into this pod. I wasn't expecting. We were sat down for about 5 minutes, and it came off, and I was doing about 3 days of work on this. Because I came in and out of a bunch of industries, and it's weird, like the speed of technology, the way it's moving right now. There's a specter over in the entire stock market around AI. Whether you are on the bandwagon like me with France, or you're off and you're getting punished. And I know we talk about it every episode, but it's impossible not to mention it in some shape or form.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing right now is very concentrated market on one particular sector. Area is probably more accurate. It's a bunch of sectors involved, kind of from different aspects. But because of this, there's an awful lot of quality businesses being ignored. And I mean, it makes sense. Like if for a company like SK Hynix to come and raise 27 billion quid in US listing, that money has to come from somewhere else. There's a finite amount of cash in the ecosystem. So I thought it would be interesting if we're looking at 10 years out, to look at some of the ever-present businesses and industries that are suffering from that outflow, maybe try to capitalize from some favorable valuations and a lower starting base, because from this date to a decade on, that does make a difference over time. So this might be me just overthinking it, and we should just say semiconductors and be done with this, and make this a 5-minute podcast. But this is inspired by our conversation last week around Boston Scientific, which was one of the biggest losers so far this year. And I think it's a very interesting time to look at medical device companies in general. So I listed out, these are the top 10 by market cap and their recent performance. And I think it's very indicative of that story of money leaving quality names to go chase the AI bubble, essentially. So starting in number one, Abbott Labs is down 26% year to date and 33% from all-time highs set in late 2021. Intuitive Surgical down 27% year to date, 32% from all-time highs late last year. Stryker down 5% year to date and 18% from all-time highs set around this time last year. Medtronic down 13% year to date, 38% from all-time highs set in late 2021. Boston Scientific, we talked about this last week, down 54% year to date and about 60% from all-time highs last September. Very swift drop there. Edwards Lifesciences, first company that's up this year. So out of the top 10, there's two, up 8%. So it's still trailing the overall market, which is kind of nuts. Down about 25% from all-time highs set in January 2022. Becton Dixon is flat year to date, down about 30% since July 2023. Alcon is down 14% year to date and down 35% since all-time highs in September 24. ResMed is down 19% year to date and 33% from all-time highs in 2021. Caveat there is that it also kind of basically just short of its all-time high this time last year as well. So that kind of, it fell, came back, fell again. And then Dexcom is up, second one that's up out of 10. It's up 15% year to date, but it's down more than 50% since its all-time highs in 2021. So there's a list there of 10 major companies that have achieved massive success in the stock market. The smallest of them is Dexcom at about $30 billion market cap. Only two are in the green so far this year. And the closest any of them are to all-time highs is Stryker at just shy of 20%. That tells a story. Now, I'm not saying that AI is the root cause of their problems at all. there's been like a wider sector rotation, and there's plenty of other like individual factors at play. We talked about, you know, Boston Scientific's troubles last week at length. A few companies in here are at the wrong end of the GLP-1 trend. Dexcom in particular is diabetes treatments. GLP-1s at the base is supposed to get rid of diabetes. Obviously, it's doing a lot more now, but ResMed as well. So ResMed makes devices for sleep apnea, and so they're saying if we're going to have if we're going to have a meaningful reduction of obesity, sleep apnea would be one of the afflictions that would come down. Nothing bad about, you know, less diabetes and less sleep apnea going around, but just to point out those two individual companies. Then like small stuff like Stryker suffered from a cyber attack in Q1. And then obviously a lot of the companies that hit their all-time highs around late 2021, they had a serious purple patch after COVID and haven't reached that same high since. So that's kind of the list. I think it's just really interesting to look at it and see the trends there, because even though they have their individual problems, some worse than others, of course, none of that seems very systemic to me. Apart from maybe the GLP-1 usage and the companies that are like, you know, going after diabetes, or ResMed in particular. But apart from that, I believe that there's a list of stocks there that will endure, persevere, and you can get them for a bit of a steal right now. Comparisons to their historical valuations, absolutely. I think because you have to put this within the context of AI in a sense, I believe they will ultimately be beneficiaries of AI. They're industries that are so complex and so regulated that it would be very difficult to be disrupted easily. And then
couldn't agree more.
They have the resources to utilize the technology within their existing ecosystems that they built up over decades. So that's my shout. If I had to pick three, I would have to do a lot more research into the individual companies, but like just judging off a stock picker kind of in instinct, I would go Intuitive, Stryker, the two that seem very much in this short-term blip category. And to be honest, both needed haircuts to their valuation anyways. They're still both expensive stocks. And then I think Boston Scientific, just because investors are acting like that is a company that's going completely out of business, and that's not the case.
And I mentioned it last week. I think it was one of the big losers in the S&P 500. If I recall, it's one I picked if I had to pick one of the big losers.
Yeah.
I think that's the one I said I'd buy.
Yeah, so it's a very like specific but a hugely successful part of the stock market over the years. And like we probably know more about it as two Irish people as well. It's such a huge industry in Ireland. But from looking at it, from the base it is at now, 10 years time, I don't think these companies are going away. I think the sector rotation, that'll be cyclical. I think the elements of an industry that could be disrupted aren't there for AI. I don't think it would be easy for new companies to come up. These are very specialist manufacturers, the processing plants, the infrastructure in place. All of that is huge, heavy investment, heavy assets.
Yeah. Massive barriers to entry. If you just imagine FDA approval and equivalent around Europe was just granted with a magic wand, which it absolutely isn't. It is a ginormous barrier and moat. You then have to think about the physicality, the fact that products, things you can touch, are implanted in patients. So when you consider those two elements, like they are nothing to do with AI. You could argue, yes, well, AI will improve the design of a Stryker hip or the implementation of intuitive surgical software. Yes, it will, I'm sure. But the absolute business was never awaiting the arrival of AI. And you would have to think to a level will only benefit from it. It will not be pushed back because of
exactly. And there were the two kind of main motivations, I suppose, behind picking this industry, because it's quite niche, it's a little bit boring, but also the fact that money is leaving these stocks for one shape or another because they're going into something more exciting that's moving faster now, that won't be moving faster for long term. And then ultimately that it will become a beneficiary of AI because it'll be able to use the technology without being disrupted by it. Now, that's obviously not a definite at all, but I think it is a probable outcome. So for that, I picked the med devices, med tech in that space. I think there's some great businesses in there that will get rewarded long term. So yeah.
Yeah. Love it. I love that, Mike. I could easily take that in as my own argument or selection, but fortunately I didn't choose it. My one is far more AI vulnerable, but the industry that I chose for the most reliable returns, if I had to buy an entire industry, isn't even an industry, despite being the one who was allowed to make up the question. Like nobody forced me.
You're also allowed to make up the answer. It doesn't matter.
So serial acquirers are not a formal industry. They're not like healthcare or med devices or utilities. It's a business model that shows up across every type of sector, most successfully in niche, as you might say in America, software. So I'm going to go with that because we make the rules of this podcast, Mike. Like, it's just you and me. Like, that we don't even have someone in the back room going, guys, take that again. We just do what we want. So I'm picking that as my industry. And the typical playbook for a serial acquirer is that they buy small, profitable, and usually mission critical businesses as cheap as they can. Sometimes like 3 to 5 times free cash flow. They generally let the business run autonomously. They go, look, the management team know what they're doing, leave them to it. And every dollar of cash flow that's generated from that that company flows into the parent, and they redeploy it into the next acquisition. And they do that consistently for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, decade after decade. And ultimately, they compound, usually, very often, at an extraordinary rate, because you're not just growing the business that you own, you're using the cash it's throwing off to keep on buying more. And as a serial acquirer, you learn how to deploy cash better, and you learn how to run the businesses in your portfolio more efficiently. And I guess
it's an iterative process, and it only gets better and better. That's why you see these companies that have such a strong track record. It's almost important to have that track record before diving in. It's tough to get these companies early.
Yeah. Like, you're right. Like, we only spoke, was it last week, about bending spoons? Or was it 2 weeks ago?
I think, yeah.
Yeah. And they're best in class at gutting and building software businesses. We spoke about the fact that they've acquired Vimeo and AOL, and even the platform we're using to record this podcast, which is called StreamYard, and loads of software businesses that most of us have interacted with. And I think what differentiated bending spoons, if you will, from Constellation Software, which I'll talk about in a moment, is that they gut them. Like, they buy a business, and
it's not decentralized. It's hands-on. Beyond hands-on, it's hands in. That's
hands in. Oh yeah, and it's when they walk through the door, you may as well start packing up the cardboard box,
much.
With stuff on your desk. But the best known case study in a serial acquirer is Constellation Software, which is a Canadian company that pretty much pioneered this model at scale in vertical market software, or VMS, which is software built for a specific narrow industry, like veterinary clinics or public transit agencies, where the product is mission critical, but the market is too small to attract big competitors. So, like, if you have a vet clinic, there's probably only a handful of players who provide the complete vertical solution for running a veterinary clinic, and you can safely say that Microsoft are not going to launch pets for B2B. Like, it's too niche or too niche. So so since 2000,
I was just going to say, it's the it's within Morningstar's Mo categories, the concept of efficient scale, where you can offer veterinary clinics vets.dos or whatever, and it's perfect and it works, and you can charge X. But for Microsoft to come in, Microsoft could come in, build a better product, and undercharge you, but it wouldn't be worth it to them. Because then you start competing on price.
The scale / margins aren't there.
And so it's a huge aspect with these type of businesses, especially within the software space.
So Constellation IPO'd something around now 20 years ago. I think it was the summer of 2006, and at its highest point was like a 200 bagger. Every $1,000 in at IPO was at its peak worth $200,000, and drawdowns, that's the stock falling from its highest point, pretty much was limited to about 26%, which is remarkably tame for that kind of return. So it's at this stage acquired over 500 businesses, operates more than 1,000 individual units globally, and the model works because VMS, vertical market software businesses, are resilient. They almost always produce recurring revenue. They're almost always have a high switching cost. If you're running a vet's practice, you're like, I cannot be bothered changing the software. My dog and cat and other pet records are in here and all their treatments. Like, it's messy business. And so that means just high switching costs. There's low capital intensity. So running these businesses doesn't require loads and loads of new cash to buy stuff. And they represent a tiny fraction of their customers' operating budgets, despite being indispensable. So if you have that vet clinic, yeah, you have to pay a few $1,000 for the software, but in the scheme of things, it's keeping the place going and it's not an expendable cost. There's no way you're not going to pay your bills. And that's the profile that makes for cheap acquisitions with durable cash flows. But what makes this really reliable, because we're looking for reliable industry, if you like, is that it is not there's no speculation here. It's a discipline driven, quote unquote, industry. I mean, it is not an industry, but they're all about being great serial acquirers, obsessing over return on invested capital, known as ROIC. That's the number they obsess on in this particular industry, and they enforce these hurdle rates on every deal. So a good serial acquirer might see Acme Brick Software walk in and they simply have a checklist. And if you don't pass one of their toll gates or their hurdle rates, they walk. It's like, sorry, look, we just can't acquire it. It doesn't meet our thing. And that really means that they primarily, these companies are primarily allocators of capital, primarily, and then secondarily, they're operators. But first is they apply. So that discipline, I guess, is also why the model has been proven exportable. You know, it's not very specific to a nation. It's been successfully run in the UK and replicated, who replicated Constellation spin-off. So there is a risk, though, that's always worth kind of identifying. And it's funny, there's a cognitive bias, I believe, in a risk, which is when you identify it and when you see a risk, there is a cog bias, I believe, to think it is lessened because you've identified it. But that's not the case. Risks are risks. And when you see a risk, you have to be aware that it might just come up and bite you in the backside. But the risk in this particular industry is growth naturally decelerates as these companies get larger, since it gets harder to find enough attractively priced acquisitions to keep moving the needle and keep showing the road.
And not only that, but the new acquisition will make less and less of an impact on earnings and revenue as
entirely
well.
So.
Yes.
You bet. So if you're a serial acquirer and you've 12 companies, adding in your 13th is a big deal. If you're a serial acquirer with 500 companies, adding in another one is just another day at the office. So you're right. The law of numbers, or whatever you want to call it, is a good example of that. Actually, better example is Roper Technologies is a real cautionary example. They guided like single-digit growth after years and years and years of double-digit gains. And now, as a consequence, it's selling at something like its spring 2019 share price. So that's the industry. I'm going to hit you with the three that, if I had to put the old grabber in and pick out three, here are three. I'm not going to say the three because it would be untrue of me to say I looked at every single business in the serial acquiring space, though I've looked at a lot of them.
Well, you could go
so I'm going to kick
across countries, across continents, across industries. It's a fairly vast.
I mean, you and I have had a lot of chat about some of the magnificent businesses in Sweden, specifically in the industry. But I'm going to kick off with the one I've already said, because you can't say I'm going to buy soft drinks and not look at Coca-Cola. Well, the Coca-Cola of this industry is Constellation Software. It's the gold standard. It's been around for 20 years. It's compounded and created extraordinary wealth by buying these small vertical software businesses, and they never overplay. And all the stuff I already said about being decentralized. So the first I would choose, without any doubt, is Constellation. I'm not just adding it because it is the Coca-Cola. I'm adding it because they have built and refined the playbook that has made this industry so famous, or so famous to us. The second I'll buy is its cousin. You know what I'm going to say. because, I love this company, and it's Topicus, or topicus.com, and it's effectively Constellation's European offspring, and follows almost the exact same playbook as Constellation, who own 49% of it. And the reason they spun it off was that Mark Leonard, the founding CEO of Constellation, who stood back from that role recently, said that only businesses who have the autonomy to make their own decisions prosper. So the whole European thing was spun off, and it kept 49%. It follows the same playbook as Constellation, mission critical software businesses in Europe, where the market remains fragmented and underpenetrated. And because it's much smaller than Constellation, it arguably has a longer growth runway, with thousands and thousands of potential acquisition targets all across the, let's say, 26 main European countries, and the many more that are kind of around the edges. So execution so far has been outstanding. And if it maintains its capital allocation discipline, Topicus will, I believe, accelerate its share price. Just simply the value created for us everyday investors. And then the third I'd pick, Mike, before I'm speeding up because it's a long old chat, this, before we get to second category, is Judges Scientific, which is a favorite of my friend Peter Slager's. I'm pretty sure it's right to say Peter, who's attending Vesticon this year, is a fan, but it's a different type of serial acquirer, but it's one that I really admire. It buys niche scientific instrument manufacturers that often lead really small, highly specialized markets with loyal customers and great pricing power. And these businesses generate, great margins and require, again, modest capital investment. And I just think it sits right beside Constellation and Topicus very nicely, even though it's way, way smaller. But its acquisition philosophy has been really exceptionally disciplined for decades. And if that discipline continues, Judges Scientific has pretty much every chance to remain one of the UK's best long-term compounders, because it's been a brilliant one. And I've loads of honorable mentions, like Lifco, which you and I have discussed.
Chapters Group, another
Chapters Group,
unofficial
ad tech, Indutrade, I think, was one that you blessed for Nexus, maybe.
No, Indutrade didn't make it into Nexus, but it was close. But yeah, those Swedish industrial serial acquirers really have unlocked an awful lot of value.
Loads of them. Yeah. Compass Diversified, there's loads of them. Okay, so that concludes our reliable growers industry segment, folks. And I think it's a lovely segue. Well, it's the only segue into the next bit, where Mike and I are going to talk about the industry, the entire industry we would back for a moonshot return, for supernormal returns, if such a thing is real, when you buy an entire industry. So, Mike, what industry would you buy if you're looking for the moonshot?
Yeah, again, went across a lot here. There's a fair few which you can dip your toe in that are on the public markets as well. A lot of, moonshot technology is kept in private markets, but they come and they need to get funding, and there is a lot of funding in public markets for them. But, they all kind of tell a similar story. There's huge potential, not any real commercial viability just yet. Quantum computing, probably the highest potential out of the lot, but maybe the hardest to execute. CRISPR, gene editing is an obvious one there. We've talked about it a lot. This is quite close, really. It already is. We're seeing
quantum CRISPR editing computing.
We're seeing genuine cures come to market, and will in the future like never before. We've already seen it with CRISPR therapeutics and sickle cell disease. The only problem is it costs $2 million for a treatment. So
yeah,
autonomous,
and it's no plain sailing either. It's a bit like what's that treatment for cancer that's been around from the 70s? The chemotherapy. Seemingly, it requires immunosuppressing drugs, and it's all very unpleasant. But yeah, the benefit obviously outweighs the downside. But anyway, what industry did you choose, Mike?
So the one I settled on is nuclear, and particularly these things called
I should have guessed,
small modular reactors, which is kind of the next phase, or the next generation of the nuclear industry. So nuclear itself is not that speculative. This is new wave of companies that are trying to upend how the industry works. So small modular reactors, SMRs, designed to be smaller, obviously. more flexible, easier to build than traditional nuclear power plants. And that's the difference, really. It's essentially trying to take away all the pain points that have hounded the industry and held back nuclear for so many years. So faster and cheaper construction, obviously, also modular construction. I'm just saying the letters now, but that's a big plus because these companies can build on site and ship them out. So they can build world-class manufacturing facilities instead of having to go out to wherever, 3 Mile Island or Sellafield or name another nuclear site and do it there. On top of that, then that makes it much easier to bring in these new next-gen safety systems. And they don't need any active management at all, which is a big plus and probably the most important part. And then the last kind of huge benefit, I suppose, to SMRs is they have a much smaller physical footprint. So a traditional nuclear power plant requires huge swaths of land, enormous bodies of water for cooling. Probably the inverse for SMRs. They can be deployed in places where a massive plant just wouldn't be possible. So all of this means there's a lot of interested parties right now, like as in just in general, the demand for energy has never been higher, and it's only going to grow with this AI infrastructure, the data centers, everything else. So Bank of America believes that nuclear will be a $10 trillion industry. And demand will triple by 2050. Basically, every hyperscaler is getting involved in some way, shape, or form to help power their data centers, obviously. Trump set out a formal goal of quadrupling U.S. nuclear capacity. So from 100 gigawatts as it is to 400 gigawatts by 2050. And yeah, the excitement is real. Like it's very much, everyone is kind of backing these because they are a more sustainable, more efficient, and more viable option for nuclear in general. But they're not a magic wand yet at all. And this is why they are a moonshot. Like as in, there's only 2 SMRs operating commercially in the world right now. One is in Russia and one is in China. Both ran over budget, behind schedule, and currently producing lower than expected output. So it's not a finished product whatsoever. But the excitement is there, the momentum is there. There's regulation coming in to help it. There's huge funding, like Google, Amazon, Facebook in particular. They're all getting very involved with the SMR space in particular. So looking at the companies, the real moonshots, the pure plays are NuScale, which is aiming for a reactor on the market by 2030. Oklo, you mentioned this company recently on the pod. This is the Sam Altman-backed company. So it's focusing on smaller reactors. And I think the business strategy behind this is probably the most, the one that stands out the most, considering just the money being thrown at AI in general. So their plan is to sell directly to data center operators. And it's actually targeting its first unit by 2027. So as it stands in terms of targets, that's the closest we're coming to true commercial viability. And then the last one is Nano Nuclear Energy, which is developing micro reactors, plus its own HALEU, so HALEU. It's high assay, low enriched uranium, which is the fuel that is essential to pretty much every next gen SMR. And that's kind of underpinning the entire industry, which is interesting because it opens up the concept, the idea to pick and shovels as well. You don't have to pick whether Oklo or NuScale or Nano Nuclear Energy is going to win this race for the SMR space. You could back companies called Centrus Energy, which is the only US licensed supplier of this HALEU uranium, which is essentially underpinning the entire industry. So those are the pure plays, and then Centrus Energy, which is right beside it as well. But in nuclear in general, there's plenty of other companies. Like there's blue chip stocks in nuclear as well. Constellation Energy is an old favorite. Vistra is there as well. The industry as a whole is set for growth. That $10 trillion figure from Bank of America isn't just for the SMRs, it's for nuclear as a whole. And there's huge demand, like as in we're seeing traditional power plants get a huge boost as well. Microsoft is backing the opening of the reactor on 3 Mile Island. That's going to come online for Constellation quite soon, hopefully. So yes, SMRs are the moonshot, but in general, the nuclear trend is here and it's going to be around for a very long time. Like it's interesting that both Bank of America and Trump put that 2050 figure in place. That's 24 years.
I mean,
you know what I mean? It's so far.
You're kind of safe saying, we'll give till 2050. It's what? Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, I hear you though. I
But
mean, you've obviously
it
got to
shows
sit
that the
down.
trends are secular. They're here to stay, and they're here to stay for a long
Uh-huh.
time.
Oh,
It's
yeah, yeah,
very
yeah.
encouraging. So it is a long way away from being commercially viable, which makes it a moonshot. But there's a lot of people, both in government and in business, and the companies that we're talking about in business are all within the Magnificent Seven, the most profitable and best operated companies in the world. They're all wanting this to work out. So with that, it feeds me a bit more with confidence than say something else, which is just pure, attempted magic. So yeah,
Oh, yeah, yeah,
for
yeah.
that consideration, I picked small modular reactors in the nuclear space.
I like it. Sometimes I think Chernobyl did for nuclear what the movie Jaws did for great white sharks. Like, what I mean is, like, great white sharks are great lads altogether. They mind their own business. They don't want to eat people. They have accidentally bit people because people look like a seal. So look down with that kind of stuff. But like, everyone hated great whites after Jaws. Now bringing it across to nuclear, the world, we're all a bit kind of, I wouldn't like a nuclear reactor in my backyard. I know, you're right, but it is by far the cleanest, most efficient way of producing energy from something Mother Nature gave us. So I get it. Like, we all know Sellafield and Chernobyl and all that kind of stuff, but it is deserving of a fresh consideration, especially when you look at the power that can be produced in such a clean, environmentally friendly way. Misunderstood. And then, of course, Sam Altman, like, he invented AI, right? If he likes it, then we gotta like it too.
I don't know. I don't know if you want to be associated with Sam Altman right now. Did you see the
No,
Apple are
yeah.
suing him now as well?
Oh, yeah. We could have gone there in this podcast, but let's let some air fill that sails, because that's going to be quite the courtroom battle, you got to imagine.
Very much so. I don't think they're going to IPO this year because of it. Right. We won't get waylaid
right.
by
I'm
that.
going to give my one quite fast, because our listeners are like, get on it, Savage. Just do your thing. So you touched on it in your opener, and one of the two you mentioned, I've gone for very obvious, but quantum computing is the purest small market today. Enormous disagreement about tomorrow industry. Like, it is a moonshot of moonshots, and I have to put it out there that it is an extraordinarily moonshot. So just to remind our listeners, because I know we attract intelligent people, and I know we have a load of physicists who fully understand quantum, but just in case you've had a drink and slightly forgotten, I thought I'd remind people, what is it? Because you will, in your lifetime, hear more about quantum computing. So what it does is it uses the physics of subatomic particles instead of traditional on-off switches for powering computers. So if you were to go into like small mode and fly inside your computer in movie style and fly through the circuit boards like streets of LA, you would find that it is comprised of millions and billions of these teeny weeny little switches, like the light switch on the wall. They're either 1 or 0. When you stack them all up together, they create information. Well, a normal computer uses that. It's known as a 0 or a 1 for obvious purposes. When the light switch is off, it's 0. When it's on, it's 1. But a quantum bit, or a qubit for short, can be a mix of both at once, like a little bit of David Copperfield magic. And multiple qubits can be all linked together, which is known as they are entangled for obvious reasons. So the computer effectively explores as many answers in parallel rather than one distinct state at any one time. So when you're flying inside that mini computer, traditional computer, all the switches are in a specific state at any one millisecond. But in the quantum computer, that is not the case. And that makes quantum computers potentially far, 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 far faster at specific problems, like breaking down certain encryptions, simulating molecules for drug discovery, or maybe optimizing huge logistic networks where massive compute power is required. But what's kind of interesting as a sidebar is they're not a faster version of your laptop. for everyday tasks. They are very specialized tools, if you like, still very, very early, preposterously expensive, and still very error prone in the earliest stages of development. But that industry has, as measured by many people who measure industries, the most gargantuan opportunity. Market size estimates for 2025 last year kind of say the market size was something between $1.5 to $3.5 billion, which is tiny. I mean, there's companies now that are considered small that are just that size, but the compounded annual growth rates range from something like between 22% to 41%, depending on what research firm you look at. One estimate has the market growing from 1.9 billion this year to 8 billion by 2033. Another has, what I was reading, growing from 3.5 billion to 20 billion by 2030, which would be 42% CAGR, and a more aggressive long-range estimate that it could reach 50 billion by 2035. So there's a wide dispersion across analysts, which I guess is characteristic of technologies before an inflection point rather than after one, because nobody has really agreed yet. No one can see the promised land. There's too many, it's opaque, there's too many ambiguities. It's like what does it do now and who's doing it? But when we start to see these mega machines breaking down cryptography and optimizing problems, it will be a race of who can monetize the fastest. But right now, the honest answer is quantum computers still cannot reliably outperform classical computers on most commercially useful problems. And I remember years ago, by the way, pre-Facebook and the likes, hearing the chief strategy officer at Vodafone being asked what the killer app for mobile broadband was, because at the time, the giant mobile networks of the world like Verizon and Vodafone were investing absurd amounts of money to buy spectrum off the regulator, the airwaves, to literally push mobile broadband. And at the time, the mobile networks didn't really have the answer as to what is it we're building for? But strategically, they just knew, build it and they will come. The killer apps would come. So, and I remember chatting with him. He didn't have an exact answer to that. All he knew was that the right strategy was to build a network that went as fast as possible, because that was the right direction of travel. And for me, quantum computing is in the same vein. I mean, it has a massive moonshot profile, it has just an absurd, enormous optionality. It has minimal current revenue and a real chance that this thesis takes another decade to play off, or even longer. So may not fully arrive in the form that I'm pitching in 10 years, in a 10-year window. And what makes it legitimate, though, as a 10-year moonshot rather than just absolute speculative hype, is that unlike most other emerging hype cycles, quantum computing has sustained escalating investment from governments. The US, China, and the EU are all treating it as a strategic priority akin to semiconductors. So it isn't make-believe, whatever the Yeti is. It's not the Yeti of industries. This is the real deal. And the biggest tech companies on earth, Google, IBM, Microsoft, Amazon, all have dedicated quantum divisions and are spending hundreds of millions and billions on making sure that they have a lead position. And so I guess what I'm saying is that reduces the risk of the field simply running out of funding before it matures. And I should also mention, before I just pick my three, that the technology has really achieved real milestones like error correction thresholds and qubit counts and very specific narrow problem quantum advantage demonstrations that set it apart from things like vaporware. And then finally, before I shut up and get on with it, is the timing risk. So quantum's commercial payoff could land anywhere between 10 years from now and 2040. So the 10-year window, as I already said, kind of might capture the early inflection, or it might capture nothing other than R&D spending. So that's kind of, if you were to apply the 10-year calendar, it's a bit binary, lotto ticket-like distribution of outcomes. But I still think that we are looking at something that is going to be category defining, world changing, and ultimately deliver a payout as opposed to kind of the prolonged AI winter style disappointment that has hung around in various different industries or other sectors in recent times. So I'm going to name 3 companies, then we're going to wrap it and go for a cup of tea. Yeah, Mike.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, the first one you probably can guess, Ionic, IONQ is how it's spelled, and it's a pure play, publicly traded quantum computing company. What a tongue twister. And it uses trapped ion technology, which is one of the leading approaches to achieving fault-tolerant qubits. So without getting too hyper nerdy, the problem with qubits is that they don't do false well, and it's so basically Ionic has the most direct way of investing in quantum computing before the technology matures. But it is early stage, as I said. It's pre-profit. It carries a massive risk profile. Moonshot squared. So that's the first one. Second is Rigetti Computing. Another one I'm pretty sure I mentioned on the podcast. I do a lot of talking about this stuff, so I might have been talking to myself out the back garden.
We've had a quantum episode on before for sure.
Was I on it?
You were.
Was I any good?
It's up for debate.
Well, then I probably already spoke about Rigetti, which is my second one, a superconducting qubit quantum computer developer and another pure play option in the space, and they're fluting around with other technologies in the space, but yeah, they're the ones. And then the third one everybody knows, it figured in the movie The Godfather, IBM. Mr. Corleone, can you identify your source of wealth? Yeah, I made it in the stock market, and it's like, specifically IBM and the likes. So IBM has been around since, well, it's been around most of our lives. It runs one of the most established quantum computing research programs in the world, no questions. It's backed by IBM's balance sheet, decades of qubit and error correction research, plus a cloud accessible quantum platform that is already being used by boffins and researchers and enterprises and the likes. And unlike the pure plays that I just mentioned, a quantum failure wouldn't sink IBM. The other two are goose if quantum turns out to be too big of a thing. So it's a lower risk way to get exposure to quantum. It's a brand we all know, and it's somewhat fallen out of the limelight over the last 10 years. We don't talk about IBM much as a hyper innovator, but certainly when it comes to quantum computing, when the day in the sun arrives, I think IBM is going to rise again.
Yeah, for me, quantum seems too far out for these pure plays at the minute.
Yeah, no, I get that. I buy that. Look, I really, you know me, if I'm going risky, I'm going risky, and if I'm going conservative, I'll do that. So look, let's conclude we've both pitched 4 industries. You went with medtech, I went with serial acquirers. Emma, you're the one who said it. You can't forget it. So if you had to take 10K and split it between medtech and serial acquirers, how would you split it, Mike?
Oh, probably 7-3 serial acquirers.
Oh, you'd go 70% into my idea.
Yeah, actually, I own a bunch of serial acquirers already.
You do.
In my style of business.
Yeah, I think I do the same. I'd go about 80-20 into serial acquirers. And then on our moonshots, we have quantum from me versus it's been a long week. What did you say again?
Small modular reactors in nuclear.
Small modular reactors. Thank you. I was listening, but in fairness, I have a lot to think about. So 10 grand, how'd you split it between your nuclear reactor at the back garden or your uncle's quantum bit lab at the back of his back garden?
Well, it's a weird one because like the winners of quantum will probably be boring, like Google and IBM.
And you know what I mean? Notice it happened.
Yeah, so I think the more exciting pure plays are on the nuclear side. So I'll go 80-20. I think it's I think quantum is further away, even in this 10-year timeline. I think it's further away than we give it credit for, even though the companies are here.
I should have gone with CRISPR. Totally regret it. Well, we record another podcast, Mike. We just leave it go. All right, so I'm going to give 80% to your idea. Nuclear reactors out in your grandpappy's back garden, and I'm going to throw 20% into quantum, the industry, because it was my idea. I got to get behind myself sometimes. But yeah, I think nuclear was a better one.
Lovely. Okay, we'll leave it there. We've been talking for too long already.
Ooh, yeah. Okay, folks, just come to Investicon. Stop your messing. Go to investicon.ie and buy a blooming ticket right now, or email Brian if you want something like $200 off, if he's still doing that. Okay, Mike, it's been a pleasure. Why don't we do it again next week? I think we're having the lols and the laugh riots.
Sounds good. I'll see you same time next week. Thank you for joining me, and thank you everyone for listening. We'll talk to you next week.